Hello everyone, new paradigmers. Welcome to this new video. And today we're going to talk about Neptune, the long transit in the sign of Pisces, and currently at 15 Pisces, exactly trining Jupiter in Scorpio. So we all think about trines as some fabulous magical energy, but it's a little more complex than that. So we're going to look at the overall meanings of these transits, which started in 2011 and will continue for 14 years until 2025. So Neptune is in its own sign for that whole period of time. Now, interestingly, Neptune's time in each sign is about 14 years, whereas Uranus is about 7 years. So it's double the orbit of Uranus. And then the orbit of Neptune with Pluto, the other outer planet, is at a ratio of 2 to 3. So 2 Pluto revolution leads to 3 Neptune revolutions. So there's an interesting ratio between all the outer planets. But let's focus on Neptune. It's in its own sign, it's very powerful, and I wrote a book on it. So first of all, I would like to inspire you to check this book and understand these deep, deep existential questions. What is Neptune about, truly? Ruling the sign of Pisces, at least since it was discovered in the 1800s. Neptune is also the natural ruler of the 12th house because there's a natural resonance between the sign of Pisces and the 12th house. The 12 signs and the 12th house. So if we want to understand Neptune, we also need to understand Pisces and the 12th house. So when we look at the other outer planets, which are Pluto and Uranus, we often relate them to very important changes and the need to redefine our values, the need to uproot, and the need to basically destroy and rebuild in one way or another. But Neptune operates quite differently because Neptune relates at its deepest core to our memory of having been in the cosmic womb. Now, go back to the 12th house, and that's exactly above the ascendant. And then after the 12th house comes the first house, which is the birth, the beginning, the birth of our individual selves. So the 12th house is before the birth. That's where we were in the womb. But not just our mother's womb, it's the womb of the universe. Before we were separated, before we were defined by time and space. So Neptune represents our memory, whether it's conscious or unconscious for most of us, our memory of what it means to be in a place where everything is one, where we all originate from that same womb, and therefore there is no division. There is no such thing as race, species, different places, because in that place, in that womb, there's no time. Think about a reality where you remove time and space. Everything happens at all times, everywhere, always. So imagine that you are everything at all times, everywhere, always. Eternity. Now, the first house is when we begin counting time. And when we enter the dimension of time and space. Look at your birth chart. What is it? You're born at a certain time, in a certain place, and your chart shows where the planets were, which is like the hands of a clock. Saturn was here, and Mars was here, and Pluto was here, and this is why you're creative, and this is why you want, a deeper commitment in your relationships. Whatever your chart says is what you're about and what your course of evolution is about. But if we take time and space, if we go to the Neptune realm of the 12th house realm, you are all the planets and all the signs at once. So there's no definition of you, because you're everything and everyone is everything. So that sometimes it's hard to wrap your head around that. But it is important to realize that, because it's part of our chart to have that 12th house and to move beyond time. In some ways, we live in two dimensions, the time-space dimension and the timeless dimension, and they operate almost simultaneously, and we move from one to the other. So from a Neptune point of view, you don't have an ego. You are part of everything and you are nothing at the same time. It may sound very spiritual, but if we live here in this dimension and we connect to that energy, we need to be smart about it, because otherwise we may risk being almost, I would say, ego-less, which may sound again very spiritual, but to be ego-less means that you can't defend yourself, you don't know who you are, you don't know where you're going, you like everybody but no one in particular, you relate to everything but nothing in particular, so you're kind of this everything and nothing. And emotionally, that's almost impossible to survive, it's not a very sustainable thing to do. So people that have a Pac 12 house, or very, very strong Neptune, have that memory of the womb where everything was one and undefined. And so they come here now in this time and space, and they have to make decisions, they have to choose what they want. And there's a lot of resistance, and there's many challenges, and there's a lot of friction. And that's what the first house is. The first house is the house of Mars and Aries, and it has to do with finding your own individual path, taking charge of your own destiny, and making sure you stand vertical and defy gravity, so you can wake up every morning and walk and do and proceed, and not just lay flat on your bed, because that's what Neptune would do. This is why Neptune has to do with sleep, whereas Mars has to do with being awake. What's happening during sleep is that you surrender your ego to the night. You become nothing. You are at the mercy of larger reality. You tap into the unconscious realm, and perhaps you go back to that place of the womb. But needless to say that Neptune is important because it reminds us what the womb is about and what happened there, and the fact that there is more to life than just fighting and making more money and wanting, another relationship. It kind of takes you to the big picture perspective and realize, wait a minute, all of this is for what? It's for love. it's for evolution, it's for growth, or it's just for being. So all of us have a memory of what it would mean to go back to that ideal place, this paradise that we lost, perhaps. And as we remember that paradise, we try to recreate it. That's where our Mars and Neptune start to talk to each other. Okay, Neptune, you bring back this memory, and Mars is going to act upon it. How am I going to recreate this place of, of unconditional self, of all-encompassing truth, into this time and space? So how am I bringing this heaven on the earth, in other words? So Neptune's important for that. But on the other hand, there's a constant conflict between Neptune and Mars, because Neptune says, I don't really want to be here. I don't need this separation. I don't want to fight and face suffering and do things on my own. I don't understand why there are countries, why there are governments, and why, we can't just, give each other a break. Why is there so much competition and friction and separation and black and white and women and men and all these distinctions, all these egocentric definitions? And yet, we're here. But from our Neptune perspective, we may wish we were not here. So wherever we have our Neptune in the chart, whether natally or wherever current Neptune is transiting, it brings back that memory of the womb, but it also it puts us in a place where we can be very naive, where we don't defend ourselves properly, and where basically we may end up losing our boundaries, losing ourselves, and not being so connected to time and space. For example, if I have Neptune in the second house, which is the house of resources, it's the house of material things, I may not understand why we need money. Doesn't everything belong to everyone? Or if I have Neptune in the third house, I don't know why we speak different languages. Aren't we all seeking the same truth? Aren't we all looking for the same truth? Why do we need to use different languages? So we want to find a universal language. And if Neptune is in the fourth house, then why do I have a separate family? Why can't I just live with my universal family and see that everyone is my brother and my sister, and even the animals are part of my family? And if it's in the fifth house, then I see all the children of the world as my own. And everything I do and create and actualize as a Leo placement must serve the greater good. My creativity feeds everybody, and so forth. So that, you'll have to read the book to go deeper into all the houses and signs and explore this interplay between the timeless dimension and the time and space dimension. But if we look now at the actual transit of Neptune in Pisces, what do we notice? There is a dissolving of boundaries. For example, today more than ever, even though, we still fight wars and there's still the definition of countries and identities, when one country faces a problem, it impacts everybody. Everybody knows about a boat that capsizes in Indonesia, and that immediately creates a wave of either sympathy or condemnation, and even economic processes that occur in one country can affect different countries. So what happens is that problems in one place will affect the whole world, the same way that solutions in one place can solve world problems. So more than ever, we feel that we are on the same boat. And this is why there's so much worry about what's going on anywhere in the world, because we see the destruction of the planet. We see what's happening in Brazil with the deforestation. We see what Trump is doing in the United States and basically decimating the environment. And we know that what happens in one country will snowball to all of us. We are one on this planet. Interestingly, just as Neptune entered into Pisces, that's when the Fukushima incident occurred. Now, obviously, we all know this is tragic, but what is so particular about Fukushima is that it affected the oceans. Up to this day, it's out of control. And so there's radioactive matter that pours into the ocean. And what is the ocean? It's traveling all over the world. So that event that occurred in Japan 7 years ago is everybody's problem. It's not Japan's problem. It affects sea life, and we all eat seafood. It kills our ocean. It travels through all the oceans. So this is a symbolism of that Neptune in Pisces energy where everything is contaminated, beginning with the environment. And Neptune reflects that need to return to nature, to return to simplicity, to return to the womb where everything was so simple. Paradise, where we did not have ambitions or personal desires, but we all lived in harmony with nature. This is why strong Neptunian people will be more of the hippies. You know, they want to live naked on the beach. So in many ways, as we face these problems, we also face a collective anxiety and a need to return to the simple, a need to strip down the layers. This is why today more than ever, people want to return to nature. They want to leave the big cities and return to, rural environment, closer to nature, simpler lifestyle, shed possessions, and live closer to nature, closer to the natural cycle. So that's the positive side of it. And like I said, there's a bit of a hippie mentality in Neptune, for better and worse. So what is the better? The better is that we remember why we're here. We remember, the bigger picture, and we remember that collective unity and the fact that if we hurt somebody, we actually hurt ourselves. For worse, the problem with, this Neptunian mentality is that we forget that we are actually living in time and space. So we only stay in the timeless, and we have a difficulty landing back and making sense of how to live here and how to make this work. This is why naturally Pisces opposes the sign of Virgo. The 12th house opposes the 6th house. There's a natural balance between the ideal memory of the womb and the need to be practically involved with our current existence. And 6th house has to do with making life work, being healthy, taking care of your diet, exercising, remembering you do have a body. Most importantly, the 6th house and Virgo, and Mercury for that matter, has to do with work. Now, it's not only work as I need a job, but it's work as in work on your relationships, work on your diet, work on your self-worth. it has to do with self-improvement on all levels. And whatever you have in your sixth house reflects where that critical thinking is necessary. So if we speak of the hippie mentality, we may lack the critical thinking, and we may not want to be here. And that is one of the critical crises of Neptune in the 12th house. The reluctance to be born in the first place. Why am I here? Is this my last incarnation? I hope I'm done with this life down on this dimension. You know, you hear these stories over and over again, especially from people who do some spiritual work, and they feel so trapped in the density of this dimension of time and space, and they want out. But as we know, I mean, look at nature. No one returns to the womb. You don't crawl back to your mother's vagina. You know, the only way is forward. And it's interesting when we use the word forward, because it's, you know, if we speak of timelessness, there's no backward and forward. And yet, it's interesting to understand from a psychological point of view that wherever we have Neptune and whatever planet or signs are in our 12th house, we feel that difficulty coping with our birth. Now, someone that doesn't accept their birth are going to be in a constant fight. And who are you fighting? You're fighting the currents. You're fighting the wave. You're swimming upstream because you don't want to be here. And it makes it all more exhausting. So as Neptune moves into Pisces, we may wish for, in some ways, we may wish for salvation. We may wish for this nightmare to end. Even, you know, we remember the Mayan calendar in 2012, just as Neptune entered Pisces, and there was this end of the world, you know, kind of hysteria or contemplation, which is something that Neptune actually fancies, because Neptune is not afraid of death. Neptune is afraid of living here. But the reality is, if we want to really tap into the highest Neptune frequency, it's actually accepting to be here and to do service. And accept the fact that despite our discomfort, there is a universal reason for the chaos, for the suffering. It's not in vain. We don't always understand it, but that's the true Neptune work, is to be in acceptance. Not in acceptance of what we want life to be, but what it actually is. So we look at nature and the beauty of nature, and then we see the innocent in nature being preyed upon. You know, the lion eating the lamb, and whatever predator basically looking for an easy meal. And the easy meal is usually going to be an innocent, beautiful, defenseless creature that just happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time. And that's very hard for our system. Even though we may understand it intellectually, we don't understand it emotionally. So accepting life is accepting the battle, accepting that it's not going to be easy, and that life is actually a construction site. Life is not a ready dimension. Life here is a tremendous amount of work. So as now Neptune progresses through Pisces, and it's trining Jupiter in Scorpio, Jupiter in Scorpio exposes all the shadow work, all the Hollywood figures that have abused their power and are now, exposed in unflattering light. And then the priest. Religion is Jupiter. Jupiter in Scorpio, the shadow of priesthood and the shadow of religion. And all of us at this time may feel disillusioned with our teachers. We may feel that, there's a lot of darkness underneath the optimism. So that balance between Neptune and Jupiter is, on the one hand, expanding our spiritual development, because both Jupiter and Neptune represent our need to find meaning in this world. But because one is in Scorpio and the other one in Pisces, the challenge is to understand that our spiritual work does require shadow work. That it's not all about it's all good and transcend and being a spiritual bypass. It's about going where it hurts. The last cycle of Jupiter-Neptune started in 2009, right after the economic crisis collapse. And the next one is going to be a conjunction of Jupiter-Neptune in 2022, and it's going to take place at 23 degrees Pisces. So we are now basically at the end of a cycle that began in 2009. And what happened in 2009? You had this massive expansion, deflation. Tremendous spiritual potential, but in an economic crisis where everything shrank and people were out of jobs and the whole American dream became a nightmare. That's what Jupiter and Neptune do. They create this, on the one hand, very expansive idealism, and then they bring a reality check to see if this is just wishful thinking or if it actually works in time and space. Try to see where you were around May, June 2009 when that cycle started. And so now we are at the last square before the next conjunction in 2022. So we continue this spiritual development, and the biggest question is, again, do we want to be here? Do we accept our incarnation? Are we saying yes to life? Are we willing to wake up every morning and face the new battle and face a new victory, or perhaps be defeated? So these are deep existential questions, and questions that affect, the collective at this point. Because the moment we say yes, and we say, we're willing to try, we're willing to be here, we become part of the ecosystem. We can better flow with the flow of life rather than swim upstream. So try to see where the transit of Neptune in Pisces is in your chart. Is it in your 7th house? Does that affect your relationships? Do you feel like you want to go back to the womb through your relationships? Who do you think your partner is? Are you perhaps not accepting them for who they are? Or are you not accepting time and space and falling in love with someone who is not reachable, who is not really able to give you any affection? Once again, the timeless and the time and space. And if it's in your 8th house, do you feel invincible? Or do you feel paranoid? 8th house has to do with our power and our trust, where we're the most vulnerable. So people with Neptune in the 8th house can feel like they are above death, because in the womb and in timeless reality, there's no such thing as endings. And if you're deathless, then you're invulnerable. But then they face death, and people leave them, and they face all kinds of emotional crisis that reminds them they are not invincible. So what happens is that there's a collapse there that can lead to suddenly feeling completely exposed to danger, as if everyone's after me, as if all my sense of security is dissolving. But on a deeper level, it is what we talked about, the shadow work. If you're willing to go and expose and process these darker, emotional insecurities, then you can be more at peace with life. And so it goes. So I hope this inspires you to better understand the transit of Neptune in Pisces. We have, 7 more years to go. We're halfway through 2018 today. We have until 2025. And let's make the best of it, because this is a time to heal our relationship with our own life, heal our relationship with God, and in some ways, heal nature.